Welcome to Moonlight Tales by Crawford. Please watch, subscribe, like, share, comment. Thank you. She seduces the billionaire and ended up with sextuplets. The first time Lena Torres met Damian Blackwell, it wasn't at a glittering party or a boardroom filled with power suits. It was in the middle of a rainstorm, standing on the cracked sidewalk outside a coffee shop that smelled like burnt beans and broken promises. The storm had rolled in without warning, sharp, fast, and heavy. One moment the sky was gray, the next it was roaring, thunder shaking loose the leaves from the maple trees lining Fifth Avenue. Lena had no umbrella, no jacket thick enough to handle the cold October rain. She had been running, late for the second time this week, to the small cafe where she worked part-time while finishing her night classes in accounting. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she reached the door, her breath sharp in her chest. Inside, the warmth hit her like a memory she couldn't afford to keep. The smell of espresso and sugar felt like comfort, but comfort was a luxury, and she had rent due in 2 days. Torres, called her manager, a squat man with a voice that could curdle milk. "You're 10 minutes late again." "I know, I'm sorry," she said, shrugging off her soaked hoodie. The bus broke down 3 blocks away. He didn't reply, just pointed toward the register. Lena tied her hair back, smoothed her apron, and forced a smile. Smiles were part of the job, smiles paid tips. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up automatically, ready with her practiced greeting. That's when she saw him. He didn't belong there. That was her first thought. The stranger who stepped inside carried the kind of presence that made everyone else fade out of focus. Tall, tailored, and unmistakably out of place in a small, struggling cafe. He looked like money, like the city bent around him instead of the other way around. His charcoal coat was still dotted with raindrops, his dark hair slicked back neatly. His eyes, gray, cold, assessing, swept over the room before landing on her. For a second, Lena forgot to breathe. He walked to the counter slowly, as though measuring each step. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. "Black coffee. No sugar." Lena nodded quickly, turning to the machine, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the filter. Something about him unnerved her, maybe because he looked like a man used to being obeyed. Maybe because she'd seen his face before. It hit her as she set the cup on the counter. Damian Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries, the man whose photo had been plastered across the financial pages last week with the headline, "The Reluctant Billionaire." The man who owned half the building she passed every day. And here he was, ordering a $2.50 coffee from her. He reached into his wallet, a sleek black thing that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and slid a crisp $100 across the counter. "Keep the change," he said absently. Lena blinked. "Sir, this is too much." He looked up from his phone, eyebrow raised. "It's just coffee." She hesitated, then folded the bill back toward him. "It's not just coffee to me. And I don't take charity." That got his attention. His eyes lifted from the screen, meeting hers directly this time. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Then take it as a tip for honesty." Lena hesitated again, but the line behind him was growing, and her manager was already glaring. She nodded once, sliding the bill into the drawer without another word. When he turned to leave, she caught a faint scent of something expensive, cedar, rain, and quiet danger. Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. That should have been the end of it. But fate, if Lena believed in such a thing, wasn't done with her yet. 2 days later, she was wiping down tables when the bell chimed again. She didn't look up right away. The lunch rush had left her exhausted, and the floor still needed mopping. But when a deep, familiar voice said her name, her heart tripped. "Miss Torres." She straightened, eyes widening. Damian Blackwell stood at the counter again, as perfectly composed as before, though this time the rain had been replaced by sunlight spilling through the window behind him. Mr. Blackwell, she said cautiously. You came back for another coffee? Not exactly. His tone was unreadable. I came to speak to you. Her first thought was that this had to be a prank. Billionaires didn't just come to speak to cafe workers. But his expression didn't waver. About what? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and set it on the counter. Your resume. Lena stared. How did you? You left it behind, he interrupted smoothly. It was tucked into one of the takeaway bags yesterday. I assume you're looking for work. Her stomach dropped. She had slipped a few copies of her resume into random delivery bags that morning, hoping one might land somewhere useful. Apparently, it had. Yes, she admitted. But I didn't mean to. You're honest, he said again, as if confirming a theory. That's rare. Lena crossed her arms, uneasy. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Blackwell? He glanced around the cafe before answering. A personal assistant. Temporary, 3 months. It's not glamorous, but the pay is more than what you make here. Significantly more. The words hit her like lightning. For a second, she couldn't speak. You want to hire me? I need someone who isn't intimidated by me, he said simply. You argued over a tip. That tells me you won't tell me what I want to hear. Lena bit her lip, weighing her options. Her father's hospital bill was sitting on her kitchen table. Her rent notice waited beside it. 3 months' pay at billionaire level could change everything. Still, something about his calm confidence made her wary. And if I say no? He smiled faintly. Then I'll have to find someone else. But you'll always wonder why a man like me came back to a coffee shop twice. That made her laugh before she could stop herself. You really know how to make a sales pitch. I built an empire, he said, tone almost teasing. Convincing people is my job. She studied him for a long moment. His eyes didn't flicker. Finally, she exhaled. All right, Mr. Blackwell. I'll take the job. Good. He extended his hand, and when she shook it, a small spark jumped between them, so faint she might have imagined it. As he turned to leave, he said quietly, be at Blackwell Tower tomorrow at 9. Don't be late. When the door closed behind him, Lena stood frozen, heart pounding. The cafe noise returned around her, the hiss of milk steam, the chatter of customers, but it all felt distant. Unreal. She didn't know yet that accepting Damien Blackwell's offer would change every part of her life. She didn't know she was walking straight toward the kind of love, and chaos, that could rewrite her future. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she felt something dangerous. Hope. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds of Lena Torres's small apartment, cutting across stacks of unopened mail and the faint steam rising from a forgotten cup of coffee. It had been 2 weeks since she started working for Damien Blackwell. 2 weeks since that rainy night turned into something that still didn't make sense when she replayed it in her mind. At first, she thought it was a joke. People like Damien Blackwell didn't hire people like her. But every morning, there she was, swiping her security badge at Blackwell Tower, stepping into a world of glass and steel where even the air smelled expensive. And every morning, Damien was there. Always composed, always precise, as if his entire life followed a silent rhythm that only he could hear. He didn't talk much. He didn't have to. Lena adjusted the stack of reports on his desk, careful not to disturb the perfect symmetry of his workspace. The man didn't leave clutter, not even a pen out of line. His office looked like a museum of restraint, gray, silver, glass, and order. Miss Torres, his voice came from behind her. Deep, low, steady. She turned, heart tripping for no good reason. He stood by the doorway, removing his cufflinks as though he had done it 1,000 times before. Yes, Mr. Blackwell? He crossed the room slowly, his eyes on the view behind her rather than her face. "You've been efficient." "Thank you," she said, unsure if it was praise or a warning. He stopped beside the desk, close enough that she could smell faint traces of cedar and clean rain. "But you still hesitate before speaking." Lena blinked. "Excuse me?" He looked at her then, those gray eyes sharp but curious. "You think before every answer. You measure your words." "Why?" She hesitated again, then smiled faintly. "Because men like you don't usually ask questions without expecting perfect answers. That earn her something rare, a flicker of amusement in his expression. And you assume I'm difficult to please." "I don't assume," she said, meeting his gaze. "I observe." Damien's lips curved slightly, the smallest ghost of a smile. "Observation is a useful skill, Miss Torres. Keep it." By noon, the office hummed with quiet tension. Executives moved like clockwork, assistants carried tablets and nerves, and Lena, still new, was learning to breathe between orders. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number, are you eating today?" She frowned. Only one person would phrase it like that. Lena glanced toward Damien's closed office door. He was inside, on a call, his tone calm but clipped, discussing contracts that could shift entire markets. And yet, somehow, he'd found the time to text her. "I will when you do," she typed back before she could stop herself. A pause. Then, challenge accepted. By the time the lunch hour hit, he appeared at her desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to make the air feel different. "Come with me," he said simply. "To lunch? Unless you'd prefer another cup of that sludge you call coffee." Her mouth twitched. "It's not sludge. It's affordable." He ignored the joke, walking toward the private elevator. She followed, her pulse hammering as the doors slid shut behind them. The restaurant was quiet, expensive, and the kind of place where water glasses refilled themselves. Lena tried not to touch anything that looked breakable. Damien, on the other hand, fit into the space as if it had been designed around him. He ordered for both of them without asking. Normally, she'd hate that. But somehow, when he did it, it didn't feel like control, it felt like he'd noticed the way she hesitated reading the menu with its unpronounceable words. "Tell me," he said, once the waiter left, "why accounting?" The question caught her off guard. "Because it's stable." "That's not an answer." She exhaled, tracing a finger over the condensation on her glass. "Because numbers don't lie. People do." He studied her quietly, his gaze unreadable. "Who lied to you?" She looked up sharply. "Why would you think someone did?" "Because I know the look," he said softly. "I wear it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy, real. For the first time since she'd met him, Lena saw something behind the billionaire mask. Not arrogance. Not mystery. Just exhaustion. The kind that money couldn't cure. That night, back in her apartment, Lena sat on the edge of her bed, Damien's voice still echoing in her mind. She'd told herself this job was temporary. That she could handle it, handle him, without getting pulled in. But every day made that harder to believe. Her phone buzzed again. "Damien Blackwell, you left your notebook on my desk." She frowned, checking her bag. Sure enough, it was gone. She typed quickly, "You can leave it for me tomorrow." The city was alive that night, rain glittering on glass, taxis humming, the skyline pulsing like a heartbeat. Lena hadn't planned to see him after hours. She'd just been finishing a late project when the power flickered, plunging the office into silence except for the storm outside. And then, from the glow of his private office, came a voice. "Still here?" Damien Blackwell leaned against his doorway, sleeves rolled, tie undone, that quiet confidence softened by fatigue. She smiled faintly. You're one to talk. He stepped closer, the low light catching the rain in his hair. I thought I told you not to work late. And I thought you said success doesn't wait for office hours. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Touché. They ended up sharing takeout by the window, sushi and cheap coffee, the kind of meal that made two powerful, guarded people feel almost ordinary. For the first time, Lena saw him laugh, really laugh. It was quiet, rare, like something he'd forgotten how to do. You're not what I expected, she said softly. He looked at her, curious. What did you expect? Someone colder. Harder. Less human. His eyes lingered on her face, searching for something. I was. Until now. The storm outside grew heavier, raindrops racing down the glass. Inside, everything slowed. Their conversation faded into quiet, not awkward, just heavy with the kind of silence that hums between two people who suddenly realize they're standing too close. Her pulse quickened. She could smell his cologne, warm and dark, mingling with the scent of rain. When he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, she didn't move away. Lena, he said softly. Her name sounded different in his voice, like a promise and a warning all at once. She met his eyes, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. No one leaned in first, it just happened, inevitable as gravity. The kiss was slow. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the world fell quiet. And the impossible happened. They were between them that night. She ate the forbidden fruit. Hours later, the storm had passed. The city was calm again, but neither of them slept. They sat on the couch wrapped in the same blanket, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. No words, no labels, just the quiet understanding that something irreversible had begun. When she finally stood to leave, he caught her hand. Lena, he said, his voice almost a whisper. This changes things. She nodded, her eyes soft but steady. I know. He hesitated, the man who controlled everything suddenly unsure of what to do with something real. Then, softly, don't disappear. She smiled faintly. Then don't give me a reason to. And just like that, she was gone, leaving only the scent of rain and something new lingering in the air. Weeks later on the way there was screeching brakes, faces she didn't recognize, and that hollow ache sitting low in her belly. She told herself it was just stress. Long hours, bad sleep, too much coffee. But the moment she stepped off the train, the world tilted. Her vision swam. She barely made it to the corner before her knees gave out. When she opened her eyes, everything smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked wool. A nurse was leaning over her, adjusting a thin blanket. Easy there, sweetheart. You're in St. Luke's clinic. Lena blinked, trying to sit up. Clinic? What happened? You fainted outside the metro. Someone called it in, said you dropped like a stone. The nurse smiled gently, handing her a cup of water. We ran a few quick tests. Nothing serious, but you'll want to rest. Lena drank slowly, her throat dry. Did you find anything? The nurse hesitated just long enough to make her stomach twist. Miss Torres, are you aware you're pregnant? Lena froze. Her hand trembled around the cup. That can't be right. It's very right, the nurse said softly. And according to the scan, you're not just expecting one. The sound of the rain outside faded into nothing. How many? Lena whispered. The nurse's eyes flicked down to the chart, her tone tender but steady. 6. For a moment, Lena couldn't breathe. 6. That number echoed in her head, colliding with disbelief, panic, and something she couldn't name. 6 heartbeats. 6 tiny lives. 6 impossibilities. She pressed a hand against her stomach again, but it was still flat, still hers, nothing about her body made sense anymore. There must be a mistake, she managed. That doesn't happen. Not often, the nurse admitted. But the ultrasound doesn't lie. You'll want to schedule an appointment with an obstetrician soon. High risk, but manageable with care. Lena nodded numbly, every word floating past her like distant noise. Her thoughts raced, too fast, too loud, and one face kept cutting through the static. Damien Blackwell. She sat in her small apartment that evening, wrapped in a blanket that couldn't seem to stop her shaking. The rain had turned into a soft patter against the window, and the city lights glowed like blurred constellations below. She tried to do the math. It had been almost 8 weeks since that night in the cafe, the one that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Just a spark. Just one impossible night that neither of them talked about after. And yet, here she was. Pregnant. With 6. Her breath came out shaky, almost a laugh. You've got to be kidding me. She stared at the ultrasound photo in her hand, a grainy constellation of 6 tiny shapes, all clustered together like they were already a team. Tiny, perfect, uninvited miracles. Her phone buzzed on the table. Damien Blackwell, you didn't come in today. Lena stared at the message. Her first instinct was to lie, say she had the flu, food poisoning, anything but the truth. She didn't even know what the truth was yet. She typed, I wasn't feeling well. I'll be in tomorrow. The dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. No reply. She dropped the phone and covered her face with her hands. She could already imagine the look he'd give her if he found out, that calm, calculating stare that stripped you bare without ever raising his voice. Damien was control incarnate. This? 6 babies with a woman who worked for him? That was chaos. And Damien Blackwell did not do chaos. The next morning, she showed up to work pale but determined. Her plan was simple, act normal. Finish the week. Then, figure it out. She was halfway through organizing financial reports when the door opened. Damien stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, that effortless authority he carried like gravity itself. His eyes landed on her instantly. You look pale, he said. Are you sure you're well enough to be here? Lena forced a smile. I'm fine. Just a long night. He studied her, skeptical. If you collapse at your desk, I'll have HR draft a liability waiver. The teasing tone surprised her. He was trying to lighten the mood, and for the first time in days, she almost laughed. I'll survive, she said softly. Good. He hesitated, his voice lowering. You worry me sometimes. Her head lifted. I do? His gaze didn't move away. You don't ask for help. You just push through. It's admirable, and exhausting. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything in that moment, the clinic, the ultrasound, the 6 heartbeats. But the words caught, heavy and impossible. Instead, she said quietly, I'm used to doing things alone. He nodded once, almost like he understood. But neither of them moved. For a few seconds, the world shrank down to that single look, something fragile threading between them, unspoken and dangerous. That night, Lena lay awake, the city humming beyond her window. She pressed her palm to her stomach again, whispering into the quiet, what am I supposed to do with all of you? The question didn't have an answer. Not yet. But in the stillness, she swore she felt something, a faint flutter under her hand, like the softest echo of 6 tiny heartbeats whispering back. For 2 weeks, Lena lived with a secret that felt too big to fit inside her chest. She worked, smiled when she had to, and pretended everything was fine. But beneath her calm exterior, panic built like pressure under glass. 6 heartbeats. 6 chances for her life to come apart. Every morning, she told herself she'd tell Damien. Every night, she didn't. Until fate made the decision for her. It was a Friday when it happened. The morning sun glared off the skyscraper glass as Lena entered Blackwell Tower, nausea twisting her stomach. The elevator doors slid open to the 43rd floor, and she walked into an office humming with low conversation and the soft tapping of keys. Damien's voice drifted from his office, calm, clipped, commanding. She could tell from his tone that he was irritated. It wasn't unusual, but lately his mood seemed sharper, his focus fraying. He was losing patience. Not just with business, with her silence. She placed a folder on his desk and turned to leave when he said, "Close the door, Miss Torres." Her fingers froze on the handle. Slowly, she turned back and did as he asked. Damien leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his gray eyes like storm clouds waiting to break. "You've been distracted. You missed meetings. You're pale." "I'm not blind. I've been fine," she said quickly, her voice too soft to convince either of them. He stepped closer. "Fine people don't faint on sidewalks. Or disappear to clinics." Her breath caught. "How do you?" "I had someone check," he said quietly. "You weren't answering your phone. I don't like not knowing what's happening in my own company." Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. "You had me followed. I had you protected." His tone sharpened, but then softened, regret edging in. "You scared me, Lena." That broke something inside her. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "You don't get to act like you care when you don't even." Her voice cracked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "When you don't even know what you did." Damien's expression faltered. "Then tell me." The silence between them was electric, stretched thin as glass. Her throat tightened, tears threatening to surface. She reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out the folded ultrasound photo. She placed it on the desk between them. "That's what you did." Damien stared down at it, confusion flickering, then dawning realization. "What am I looking at?" His voice had gone quiet, careful. "6, she said. "That's 6 heartbeats. 6 lives. I went to the clinic because I fainted, and they told me I'm pregnant. And it's you, Damien. It's yours." The room went still. For once, the man who could close billion-dollar deals with a phone call said nothing. His jaw tightened, his hand hovered over the photo, but he didn't touch it. "You're sure?" he finally asked, though his tone wasn't disbelief, it was fear. "Yes," she said. "I wish I wasn't, but I am." He took a slow step back, running a hand over his face, the mask slipping. 6, he repeated, the word sounding foreign. "That's impossible." "Tell that to them," she said, her voice shaking. "Because they're coming whether we're ready or not." For a long time, neither spoke. The rain had started outside again, streaking the windows like blurred tears. Finally, Damien turned toward her, eyes raw and human in a way she'd never seen. "You should have told me." "I tried," she said, "but I didn't know how." "You don't do chaos. And this is chaos." He gave a short, humorless laugh. That's one way to describe it. When he looked at her again, there was something new in his expression, not anger, not denial, but a kind of fierce resolve. "You're not doing this alone." Lena blinked, startled. "What?" "I don't run from my responsibilities," he said simply. "Not in business. Not in life. And not now." Her heart stuttered. "Damien." "No," he interrupted gently. "You can hate me, you can scream, but I'm not walking away. I won't let you or them face this without me." Tears filled her eyes. "You can't just decide to be in my life because it's convenient." He stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm not deciding. I'm accepting. Whether you want me there or not, I already am. The air between them thickened, unspoken words, old pain, and something dangerously close to hope. Lena turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. I don't know if I can trust you. Damien took another step until he was just behind her. Then let me earn it. She closed her eyes, the rain's rhythm syncing with the pounding of her heart. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Then you'd better be ready for a fight. Damien smiled faintly, a softness in his tone she'd never heard before. I've never been afraid of one. That night, Lena sat in her apartment again, the ultrasound photo on the table. But this time, she wasn't alone in her thoughts. She could still hear Damien's voice, quiet, steady, real. Outside, the city glowed like 1,000 little promises waiting to be tested. And somewhere high above, in a glass office that no longer felt so distant, Damien Blackwell stared out at the rain and whispered to himself. 6 heartbeats, and one reason to finally live for something. The next week began with silence. The kind of silence that felt like the pause before thunder. Lena tried to keep her head down, doing her work, avoiding whispers, pretending everything was normal. But the air in Blackwell Tower had changed. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. A few glances lingered too long. Something was wrong. By Wednesday morning, she found out what. She was making copies when her phone buzzed, not with a message, but with a notification. A news alert. Her breath caught as the headline glared up at her. Billionaire Damien Blackwell expecting children with former cafe worker? The image below the headline was unmistakable, her walking beside Damien outside the office last week, the rain blurring around them. Her hand on her stomach. His hand guiding her toward the car. Her heart plummeted. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She scrolled down, her pulse hammering in her ears. There it was, speculation, lies, even quotes from anonymous insiders. Someone had sold them out. And the article didn't say, child. It said children. Someone knew. Lena. Her head snapped up. Damien stood in the doorway, the article already open on his phone. His expression was unreadable, that terrifying calm she'd seen only a few times before. Come with me, he said quietly. She followed him through the maze of offices. Ignoring the stares that followed. When the door shut behind them, the quiet in his office was deafening. Who took that photo? She asked before he could speak. I don't know, he said. But I'm going to find out. Lena's hands shook as she paced the room. This can't happen. My name's all over it. My family, my dad's going to see this. Lena. His voice cut through her panic, steady but low. Breathe. She stopped, gripping the edge of his desk. They know, Damien. About the babies. How? Who would? He was already pulling up another window on his screen, typing quickly. I'll have my PR team handle it. But for now, you're not going home. Her head snapped up. What? You'll stay in one of my private properties, somewhere secure. Until this dies down. Lena shook her head. I'm not hiding. This isn't about hiding, he said, meeting her eyes. It's about protection. From what? Words, she demanded. People gossiping online? He hesitated, long enough for her to realize it wasn't just words. Someone leaked private medical information. That's not gossip. That's targeted. Her stomach turned. You think someone at the clinic? Maybe. Or someone in my circle, he said grimly. Either way, this wasn't an accident. The rain began again, soft but insistent against the glass. Lena sat down, pressing a hand to her forehead. This is too much. I can't do this, Damien. I didn't ask for any of this. He walked to her slowly, his voice quieter now. Neither did I. But we have it, and we'll deal with it. Together. She looked up, eyes brimming. You keep saying that. Together. But what happens when this gets worse? When people start treating me like I'm just another scandal in your life? He didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the edge of his desk, his gaze locked with hers. Then I'll tell them the truth. And what's that? That you're not a scandal, he said softly. You're the only thing in my life that makes sense right now. The words hit her harder than she expected. For a second, the storm outside felt miles away. But peace didn't last. The next morning, her father called. His voice was tired, hoarse from too many hospital nights. Lena, Mija. I saw the news. Her throat tightened. It's complicated, Dad. I don't care about the details, he said gently. I just want to know if you're okay. For the first time that week, her voice cracked. I don't know. There was a pause. Then, quietly, then promise me you'll let someone help you. Even if it's him. She wiped at her tears. I'll try. That evening, she stood on the balcony of Damien's penthouse, the one he insisted she move into. The city stretched below, glittering and distant, like a world she no longer belonged to. Behind her, Damien approached, his reflection joining hers in the glass. You hate it here, he said. I don't belong here, she replied softly. You do now. When she turned. His expression had changed, not the confident CEO mask, but something human. Vulnerable. They're calling you ruthless, she whispered. Heartless. That you use people. Let them, he said. They'll say what they want. But they don't know me. Her gaze softened. And do you? He smiled faintly, almost brokenly. I'm learning. Because of you. The silence stretched between them, fragile, electric. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and for once, Lena didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and whispered, then maybe we'll figure it out. Together. And for the first time in days, Damien smiled, not as a billionaire, not as a man in control, but as someone who finally had something to fight for. Hospitals always smelled like second chances and fear. Lena Torres sat on the edge of the bed, hospital gown loose around her shoulders, monitors blinking in rhythm with her racing pulse. The hum of rain outside mixed with the steady beep, beep, beep of machines, like a strange lullaby meant to keep her calm. But calm felt impossible. Not when 6 lives moved inside her like whispers of the future. Damien paced the hallway outside her room, his hand clenched around a paper cup of untouched coffee. He'd faced boardrooms, lawsuits, power brokers, but this was different. He could buy silence, but not certainty. Every time the door opened, he expected someone to tell him it was time. Every time it didn't, he feared it might be too late. A doctor finally stepped out, her expression steady but firm. Mr. Blackwell, she's in early labor. We're moving fast, but her vitals are holding strong. Damien's breath left him in a shudder. 6, he said quietly, almost to himself. The doctor nodded. It's rare, but she's ready. Inside the delivery room, Lena tried to focus on the sound of her breathing. It felt like her body was splitting between terror and strength. Sweat streaked her forehead. She gripped the sides of the bed until her knuckles turned white. You're doing beautifully, the nurse said gently. They're coming steady. Lena's eyes squeezed shut. How many? 3 so far, the nurse smiled. All strong. All breathing. She let out a sob that turned into a laugh, the kind that came when life stopped making sense. Through the glass wall, Damien watched in awe. His usual armor, composure, control, distance, fell away piece by piece. He had seen miracles before, in numbers and profits. But this was different. This was real. When the nurse finally waved him in, he moved like a man stepping into sunlight for the first time. The noise faded, the monitors, the machines, the storm, until all that existed were the soft cries of 6 tiny voices. 6 heartbeats. 6 beginnings. 6 reasons to believe in something again. Lena lay exhausted but glowing, her hair damp, her smile fragile but unbroken. Damien stopped beside her bed, unable to speak. She looked up and whispered, "You made it." He smiled. Faintly. "You think I'd miss this?" She laughed weakly. "You missed lunch meetings for less important things." For the first time in his life, Damien didn't have a comeback. He just reached down, his fingers brushing over the smallest of the newborns. The baby's hand, barely the size of his thumb, curled around his finger, holding on tight. Something inside him cracked open, gentle and unstoppable. It was love, raw and terrifying in its purity. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Rain softened into silence. Lena drifted in and out of sleep, and Damien stayed, still in his suit, jacket long discarded, tie loose, hair damp from where he'd run his hands through it too many times. He watched her breathe, watched them all breathe, as if he could keep the world steady just by paying attention. When Lena stirred awake, she found him sitting beside the bassinet row, one hand resting protectively on the edge. "You're still here," she murmured. "Where else would I go?" "Anywhere," she teased softly. "You're Damien Blackwell." He looked at her then, not as a billionaire, but as a man changed. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "I think that man died somewhere between heartbeat 2 and 3. She smiled faintly, tears welling. "And who's this one?" "The man who wants to build something real." The sun rose over the city hours later, pale light spilling through the hospital blinds. 6 tiny cribs lined the room, each filled with life, each a fragile piece of an unexpected future. Lena reached for Damien's hand, squeezing it weakly. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" He nodded. "They look like you." She laughed softly. "You're lying." "I'm not," he said, voice full of something new. "They have your strength." Outside, the storm had cleared. The city below sparkled with wet streets and new beginnings. For once, Damien didn't think about what came next, the headlines, the pressure, the chaos. For now, there was only this moment, 6 miracles sleeping, a woman stronger than he'd ever known, and a heart finally learning how to be human. And for the first time in years, Damien Blackwell whispered something he actually meant. "Thank you." Lena turned to him, smiling through tears. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to start over." The steady hum of machines had become a strange comfort. For hours, Lena lay in a blur of exhaustion and awe, drifting between pain and peace, her mind floating somewhere between dreams and disbelief. 6. Every time she tried to grasp that number, it slipped away, replaced by faces she hadn't even seen yet. Tiny, soft, impossible faces. A quiet knock came at the door. She stirred. "Come in." The door opened to reveal Damien, still in the same suit, his shirt rumpled, tie undone. He looked like a man who'd fought a war and somehow won, not because of power, but because of love. He held 2 paper cups of hospital coffee. "It's terrible," he said softly, "but it's hot." She smiled, weak but real. "I though. Billionaires only drank imported espresso." He set the cup on her tray. "Billionaires also learn humility in maternity wards." She chuckled, the sound soft and hoarse. "You've learned fast." "I had a good teacher," he replied, glancing toward the bassinets. The room was quiet except for the soft, rhythmic breaths of 6 newborns. Each tiny sound, each hiccup, each sigh, filled the space like a song. Lena turned her head toward them. They all have different cries. Did you notice? He nodded, walking closer to the cribs. I've been studying them. Number 3 sounds like she's giving orders. Number 5, he's already dramatic. Lena laughed quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks. They're perfect. Damien reached down, adjusting a blanket around one of the smaller babies. His movements were clumsy but careful, like someone afraid of breaking something holy. You don't have to stay, she said softly after a while. He looked at her, startled. What? You've done enough. You don't owe me anything, Damien. He straightened slowly, meeting her gaze with quiet intensity. Don't tell me what I owe, Lena. I wasn't there for the fear, the sickness, the waiting. I can't change that. But I can be here now. She swallowed hard, emotions threatening to break free. You don't know what "here" means yet. It's not meetings and deadlines. It's diapers. Sleepless nights. Crying, a lot of crying. He smiled faintly. Sounds like a merger with chaos. Exactly, she said, smirking through tears. He stepped closer, voice lower, gentler. Then let me sign the deal. Hours passed like minutes. Nurses came and went, charts changed, and light shifted from sterile white to the warm gold of early dawn. Lena had fallen asleep again, her head turned toward the babies, her breathing soft and steady. Damien sat beside her, still and silent. For a man who had never believed in prayer, he found himself whispering one anyway, to whatever power had allowed this miracle to happen. When the first rays of sunlight hit the window, one of the babies stirred, a tiny hand flexing, then curling. Damien watched in wonder. He reached out instinctively, letting the baby's hand wrap around his finger again. Something inside him unraveled completely. The nurse entered quietly. They're all healthy, she said with a reassuring smile. Premature, yes, but strong. You got lucky. Damien looked at the 6 tiny bundles. Lucky doesn't even begin to cover it. The nurse nodded toward Lena. She's tougher than she looks, isn't she? He smiled softly. You have no idea. Later, when Lena woke, the morning light had filled the room, soft and golden. She blinked at the sight of Damien asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back, his hand still resting on the edge of the bassinet. For the first time in a long time, she saw him not as the billionaire, not as the man who had changed her life with a glance, but as something simpler. A man who stayed. She reached out, brushing her fingers gently over his hand. His eyes fluttered open, groggy but alert. Morning, he murmured. You didn't have to stay all night, she said softly. I didn't want to leave, he replied. Something warm spread through her chest, not just gratitude, but hope. You know this isn't going to be easy, she said. I know, he said, his voice steady. But nothing real ever is. Outside the hospital window, the world looked reborn. The storm had washed the city clean, sunlight catching on every raindrop that clung to glass and steel. Lena turned toward the bassinets again, her voice soft and awed. 6 miracles. Damien followed her gaze. No, he said gently, 7. She frowned faintly, confused, until she looked up and saw the way he was looking at her. The truth settled quietly between them, needing no words. For the first time in both their lives, the world didn't feel like a battle to be won, it felt like a gift. Fragile, beautiful, and completely undeserved. 6 months later, the world looked completely different. Gone were the quiet hospital rooms and the uncertainty that once filled every breath. Now there was laughter, loud, chaotic, and constant, echoing through the sunlit penthouse that had slowly transformed from a sterile space of marble and glass into something real. Into a home. Lena stood in the kitchen, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of Damien's old shirts, a burp cloth slung over her shoulder like a badge of honor. Somewhere behind her, one of the babies began to cry, the kind of cry that sent a chain reaction through the others until the air was filled with tiny protests. "Oh no, not all 6 again," she groaned, laughing despite herself. "Welcome to the orchestra," Damien's voice called from the nursery. He appeared in the doorway, a burp towel over one shoulder and a pacifier in his mouth, not his own, obviously. Lena burst out laughing. "You're wearing it wrong." He grinned, completely unbothered. "It worked for 2 minutes. That's a personal record." Together, they moved in unspoken rhythm, bottles warmed, diapers changed, lullabies hummed off-key but with love. For a man who had once ruled boardrooms, Damien had learned how to handle chaos, one diaper, one meltdown, and one miracle at a time. Later, when the babies finally drifted off for a nap, they sat on the couch surrounded by quiet, the rarest luxury of all. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, sighing. "I think we just survived the hardest morning in history." He chuckled. "You say that every morning." "And every morning, I mean it." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Outside, sunlight glowed against the glass, the skyline gleaming like it was in on their secret. "You ever miss it?" she asked softly. "Your old life?" Damien looked down at her, thoughtful. "Sometimes. The quiet. The order. The control. And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I have purpose. And very little sleep." Lena laughed, tracing circle on his arm. "That sounds about right." But peace didn't mean perfection. 2 weeks later, the headlines came again. A photograph, Damien holding one of the babies in the park, smiling in a way the public had never seen. The caption read, "Damien Blackwell, the billionaire who learned to feel." At first, he'd wanted to call his lawyers. Lena had stopped him. "Let them see," she'd said. "Maybe it's about time they did." For once, he didn't fight it. He let the world see what love had made of him. That evening, after the babies were asleep, Damien stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker below. Lena joined him, a blanket draped around her shoulders. 6 months, she said quietly. "Can you believe it?" He shook his head. "No. But I wouldn't trade a single second." She smiled. "Not even the nights you got puked on?" "Especially those," he said with a grin. "It's when I realized suits aren't bulletproof." She laughed softly, the sound carried away by the wind. Then, after a pause, she turned serious. "Do you ever wonder why it happened this way? Why us?" He took her hand gently. "Maybe because we both needed saving, and didn't know it." Her eyes softened. "You really believe that?" He nodded. "You gave me something I couldn't buy, Lena. You gave me life." She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest as the city glowed below. Behind them, faint baby sounds stirred, reminders that chaos was never far, but neither was love. "You think we'll be okay?" she asked quietly. He looked down at her, his voice steady and certain. "We already are." They stood there as the night breeze carried the sounds of the city, and somewhere inside, 6 small miracles dreamed of a world waiting for them. And for the first time in a long, long while, Damien Blackwell didn't feel like a man running from his past. He felt like someone finally moving toward forever. Thanks for watching.